Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we're calling our readings through the Johnson edition of the poems of Emily Dickinson. We turned out a poem 78, A Poor Torn Heart, a Tattered Heart. It's an amazing, amazing little poem, another death poem, another Sue poem. And our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you have been following our stuff, beginning with those set of introductory comments up through poem 77 we just finished with. I never hear the word escape here. Of course, maybe death is the escape that will be referenced. And there is a whole lot to be said about the background of this poem. Just to give it to you briefly, as she sent this to Sue, she stitched to the copy of the poem a picture of little Nell, the child we've talked about in the biographic information that Emily was witnessed the loss of. And it devastated her, as it did so many of those in the family. And the picture is of little Nell being taken up to heaven, clipped from her father's copy of the Dickens volume, The Old Curiosity Shop. And of course Nell, the child that dies in that. So there's this connection that Emily has with the possible death of children, and how specifically will she address that. I also want to point out, as we get ready to read this, the brilliant iambic rhythm here, right up to the word tenderly. And I'm going to ask what you think about the use of that word to break up this rhythm. And I also want to point out all of the trinities of this poem. Notice the opening line, a poor torn heart, a tattered heart. Notice throughout the poem, we'll come back and build off of these trinities. Let's enjoy the poem. A poor torn heart, a tattered heart, that set it down to rest, nor noticed that the ebbing day flowed silver to the west, nor noticed night did soft descend, nor constellation burn, intent upon the vision of latitudes unknown. The angels, happening that way, this dusty heart espied, tenderly took it up from toil and carried it to God. There, sandals for the barefoot, there, gathered from the gales, do the blue havens by the hand lead the wandering sails. Now, of course, sailing is not surprising to us. We've seen this a number of times in Emily connecting sailing and dying. Notice the way that the poem is constructed into its two parts. First of all, notice the trinities. A poor, torn heart, a tattered heart that set it down to rest. In other words, fatigue. We've come to the end. This is the end. Notice your three nors. Nor noticed that the ebbing day flowered silver to the west. As one is dying, one begins to pay less and less attention to things like, oh, it's getting dark at night now, and then the sun is going away. Nor noticed night did soft, notice the adjective soft, descend, nor constellation burn. And then, I think this is a key line in Emily's project, as I'll call her poetry. Intent upon the vision of latitudes unknown. There are few lines in all of Emily's oeuvre that will play such a pointed indicator of what is Emily's project in my estimation. What is Emily all about? Well, she's intent upon the vision of latitudes unknown. Obviously, if we're thinking death here, we're thinking of Plato's Phaedo, no question. I think, as I've said, a whole lot of what Emily's doing here with this speculation about what happens when one dies, and one stops caring very much about the fact that the sun is going down and that night is coming, although metaphorically one is acutely aware that this is what's happening. Why? Because as one knows one is leaving, as we have said, the park where one gets to swing only for a short period of time before you have to go to the van, as they were teaching all of us as children, right? I don't want to go to the van. We'll stay swinging at the park. Honey, you gotta go to the van. Nobody gets to swing at the park forever. You haven't met any 200-year-old people. And that fact sinks in. And I think that fact was very influential in the way Emily thought about her own life. And the question is, when it comes time to leave, right? All of a sudden, what is it that one is really focused on? Well, I think for Emily, it's in this line. It is a vision of latitudes unknown. What happens, if you will, what happens next? For Emily, that was a seriously thought-provoking question. And then the angels. happening that way is the tone of voice that I just love. And so many readers of Emily love that, she doesn't ever take these kinds of ideas too seriously. Notice, she doesn't say that I think the whole notion of angels is silly. She doesn't say that I am very much committed to the idea of angels. She rather plays the game of talking about angels just happening along the way. And then we're back to dusty as opposed to tattered, right? Or ebbing day. This dusty heart espied, saw the angels coming. And then the word tenderly. Now, here the iambic rhythm, if we scansion this, we can hear it. The angels happening that way, this dusty heart despised. And then tenderly. And it does, it breaks the rhythm entirely. And then the obvious question is why? Tenderly took it up from toil. Notice the word rest at the end of the second line, from rest to toil. And carried it to God. There, notice the repetition of there. There, sandals for the barefoot. There, gathered from the gales. In other words, finally, when you get to heaven and the angels take you, you have some rest. This poor, this torn, this tattered heart finally gets some rest. This dusty heart finally gets some rest, right? There, sandals for the barefoot. There, gathered from the gales. Do the blue havens by the hand lead the wandering sails. Finally, there is some sense of peace, some sense of closure, some sense of finality, right? And for Emily, the tone of this poem seems to suggest that all of that is positive, all of that is good, especially after being so tired, so worn, so tattered, so battered, right? Now, what are we going to do at 2a with a set of lines like this? I think that for Emily, she's arguing that death and the idea of heaven is a great comfort for the tattered heart, and that the dying, like the living, should be intent on latitudes unknown. You can read a number of the poems of Emily Dickinson that treat the idea of death and afterlife and questions about it as really being her scrutinizing what it's like to live the life of a poet. And when can one ever find genuine peace in the life of a poet? At 2b, I love her use of the word tenderly. Go back and read it for yourself and hear the way in which the rhythm is broken by that word. And I love, of course, the symbolism of boats and sailing. My Emily group pointed it out, that Emily clearly, even though she never spent any time on the ocean and in boats, she clearly is using again and again this idea of boats and sailing as being central. Speaking of boats and sailing, of course, that takes us to 3a in Plato's Phaedo, where, of course, you'll remember it, Socrates is there, about to drink his hemlock shake. Of course, the city of Athens has decided in 399 it's time for him to go bye-bye. He's done enough disturbing the youth of Athens. And before he goes, of course, he's giddy, he's excited, he's going on this journey. His disciples, his students are obviously distraught, crying and the like. And he's like, what is wrong with you guys? I'm very excited because my body is what goes away to the dirt, but my soul, it gets to go on with this journey. It's going to be a remarkable thing. Finally, at 3b, what do you imagine for yourself is that intent on latitudes unknown? To what degree are you curious? We're going to see throughout Emily's poetry this spirit of curiosity and wonder, her use of the word perhaps and the like. What is it for you? Are you at all intent on latitudes unknown? And is this why you keep coming back to the poetry of Emily? Certainly is the case for me. Thank you.